Thank you for once again tuning into the Six Pack Podcast, your one-stop stop for all things Wisconsin sports. If you are listening and you have not yet subscribed, please do so on your podcast platform of choice. Leave a nice review, some kind words, and if you're watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button. Helps other people find the show. I wanted to get in here really quickly on a Friday afternoon, Friday evening, whenever you might be listening to this, to hit some quick words on the Wisconsin men's basketball team this season. If you are just checking in to college basketball, as it takes a little bit of people time to check in, wait for college football season to end, and then check in a little bit more on the winter sports calendar. It's a good year for for the Wisconsin Badgers. And if you are already tuned in, I have some thoughts on the season so far here, and some words that I'll be publishing at Wisconsin Sports Heroics. Those will be up before tomorrow morning, before Wisconsin plays its next game tomorrow afternoon, tomorrow being Saturday, at 1:15 p.m. Also, hang around in this podcast feed because, again, we have a very special guest who I already recorded an episode with to preview the Packers-Bears game, while the Packers, with a win, can clinch a playoff spot in the NFL, do something that Aaron Rodgers couldn't do last season with the Green Bay Packers. But this season for Wisconsin basketball has been, I want to say, surprisingly successful, but I haven't really been that surprised so far. Before the season started, I thought this was a team that could compete for a top 4 spot in the Big Ten. And I think the difference from where I was then to where I am now was that I would be surprised if this team didn't finish for a top 4 spot in the Big Ten. And that is because of not just how well this team has been playing, how good this team looks, but also there's been some teams in the Big Ten this year that have disappointed. Frankly, the Big Ten is not what it has been the last few seasons. The Big Ten is having a down season. If you follow me and the podcast, either me at Kedrick Stumbris or the podcast at Scotty Sixpack on the website formerly known as Twitter, you'll know that earlier in the year I was tracking basically day-to-day, game-to-game, the big games in the Big Ten on the non-conference schedule. And Big Ten teams did not fare very well against power conference teams in the non-league portion of the college basketball schedule. It is something that has put a little bit of a damper on, the accolades that are going to come for teams that finish in the top half of the Big Ten. It's going to be a little bit harder if you're not, a top 6 team in the league to have a resume that makes you worthy of an NCAA tournament spot. Where the Badgers are faring, however, now is that they're, a surefire NCAA tournament team, in my opinion, unless they completely collapse down the stretch. Notably, the CBS Sports Eye on College Basketball podcast, hosted by Gary Parrish and Matt Norlander of CBS, they asked a question in an episode earlier this week about, can Illinois, without its star player Terrence Shannon, who is suspended for the program because he has been formally charged with some pretty gruesome allegations. He is maintaining his innocence. Terrence Shannon is, but in the meantime, he is no longer with the Illinois basketball program. But Illinois has looked very good. Illinois has a big game against Purdue tonight, if you are listening to this ahead of that game, which will be, 2 of the potentially top 3 teams in the Big Ten, which brings me to the question that was posed on this podcast, which is, without Terrence Shannon, can Illinois finish as a top 3 team in the Big Ten? And it was interesting because they were listing off the teams that Illinois would have to, beat out for that spot. And this is a national college basketball podcast, so they don't necessarily talk about Wisconsin a whole bunch. And I was like, oh, this would be an interesting place for them to actually talk about Wisconsin. And instead, Matt Norlander goes, okay, well, let's just put Purdue, Wisconsin 1-2, just for the sake of conversation, and just glossed over it. That's the weird point where we are, where it is, at least some people are kind of just glossing over Wisconsin's going to be a top 3 team in the Big Ten this year. After this wasn't an NCAA tournament team last season, this is a much, much, much improved basketball team from last year, particularly on the offensive end of the floor. I do think they've taken maybe not a small step back defensively, but that's because they have some new pieces on the team. Um, we'll get to that in a second, but their biggest thing is they've made a massive jump offensively. I have some words about that in the article that I mentioned that will be published over at Wisconsin Sports Heroics for Wisconsin's game tomorrow morning. Some words about that offensive improvement. But last year, Wisconsin's offense finished ranked 140th at KenPom in adjusted offensive efficiency. This year, the Badgers rank 15th in the country so far in adjusted offensive efficiency. Going from 140 to 15th. This is a team that looks really, really good. This is a team that hasn't taken really any head-scratching losses. Maybe a loss to Providence at Providence early in the season. The third game of the season is a little bit of a head-scratcher because Badgers just came out flat. But there was also, just a few days and travel removed from a really tough game against Tennessee, a team that looks really good, a team that is ranked 7th at KenPom in the country right now. And Wisconsin scraped to try to, stay in that game. It lost by 10, but put up a fight against a team that I think looks really good. Got blown out by Arizona, but Arizona's done that to pretty much everybody, except for their weird loss to Stanford, where Stanford shot the lights out of the gym. But Wisconsin's offense has looked fantastic, and they have not put up a stinker in any performance so far. And in big part, that is due to them having a new number 1 contributor on the team in AJ Storr. AJ Storr transferred in. He is a sophomore from St. John's. Chose not to play with Rick Pitino, chose to come play at Wisconsin for Greg Gard. And in talking in the games I've attended for Badger Notes, another site I write for, AJ Storr really, really, really does embrace the work, the process that Greg Gard puts those teams through, getting better as a defender, getting better shots up, not settling for contested mid-range shots, getting to the hoop, getting to the free throw line. He is the most used player per possession on Wisconsin's roster right now. He's one of the most used players per possession in the country. Ranks 150th in that metric according to KenPom. This guy who's getting a lot of handle on the ball and is doing a lot of work. He is taking 25% of the shots for Wisconsin right now, according to KenPom, just a ton. But he's putting in a lot of that work, not turning the ball over, and is Wisconsin's leading scorer. I would hope if you're seeing that super high usage rate and getting that amount of shots up, you're not turning the ball over. But right now, complete newcomer to the team, complete newcomer to Greg Gard's defense. He's averaging over 15 points a game. He's averaging half a steal a game, a couple of rebounds. I mean, he looks really good. And meanwhile, this team, that AJ Storr connection has made this team look quite a bit deeper. And there are guys that you would think are going to get minutes who just aren't getting minutes this year. I was really impressed coming into this season with guys like Marcus Ilver and their improvement, what it looked like. Nolan Winter, the freshman, how much he might be able to play. But they haven't been getting a ton of minutes just because they haven't needed them to. Connor Essegian, who lit up for the three-point line for a good chunk of last season as a freshman, now isn't really getting any minutes, for a lot of the problem being his work on the defensive end, trying to get a lot better there in that aspect of his game. It just hasn't come together. But all the season has shown is that he can get up the three ball. Hasn't been hitting it, for a while now because he went down through a cold stretch near the end of last season as well. Hasn't been hitting it. He hasn't been great at getting to the hoop to shoot, near the restricted area. And when you can't defend, it's hard to stay on the court that way. Meanwhile, John Blackwell, another freshman, has shown, an ability to basically create at three levels from beyond the 3-point line. He can handle the ball a little bit, gets to the free throw line. He has something like an absurd free throw rate of getting to the line right now. I was thinking about this stat earlier, and I do not have the number. Oh yeah, I do. I do have the number in front of me. Yeah, he's second on the team in free throw rate, number of free throw attempts per field goal attempt, just behind Carter Gilmore, which is a little bit of an outlier, I would say, because Carter Gilmore doesn't get a ton of shots up. So yeah, John Blackwell's been really impressive. AJ Storr has been really impressive. Looks like he's really, coachable. And this has led to a Wisconsin basketball team that I think is a surefire team to make the NCAA tournament. A team that, ranked 13th at KenPom right now. I think a team that is real shot at making the second weekend, and maybe even winning a game in the second weekend of the NCAA tournament. It's going to be a fun year. This team right now projects as having, according to KenPom, a 14-6 record in the Big Ten, a 22-9 record overall. Last season, this team finished 9-11 in the Big Ten. That's a 5-game improvement. That's huge. It's also a 5-game improvement overall, because they finished 17-13 last season. And this team's going to take some lumps. It's going to take a weird loss or two because that's just the way college basketball works. But the arc of the season, I think, looks really, really positive right now for Wisconsin basketball, because they do not have the problem they did last season where sometimes they would just go and not make a shot for forever because they have so many people who can create for them inside the paint, outside the paint. Chucky Hepburn, who hasn't been scoring at a great rate this year, but because Wisconsin, one, hasn't needed them to, and two, that's just not what he's best at doing. He's best as a facilitator, and now Chucky Hepburn actually has weapons to facilitate back to. Chucky Hepburn was better, arguably, his freshman season, when he was just facilitating to Johnny Davis, not because Johnny Davis was just good, but because that's what Chucky Hepburn does best. And when Chucky Hepburn can facilitate to Steven Crowell, who has been awesome, and when Steven Crowell goes off, he goes off. He has an effective field goal percentage that ranks 34th in the country and a true shooting percentage that ranks 45th in the country. That's a top 40 player, top 50 player in the country. Basically has an extremely high offensive rating, according to KenPom. He's playing at like a top 100 player in the country, a top center. When Steven Crowell gets going, he's a weapon. Tyler Wall can do a whole bunch of stuff, including just being a great defender. John Blackwell, freshman phenom, who, tapes starting to come in on him, and he'll be tested in the Big Ten. But when he gets going, Max Klesmit hasn't been going on the offensive end of the floor as much, but you can see he starts to take over. He starts to hit shots, and he looks really, really good at times. You add AJ Storr into the mix there, and that's not all of those guys are going to go cold all at once. And if Connor Essegian gets going at some point in time, it's going to help a lot, at a real 3-point shooting threat, because that is the one area in which Wisconsin is hurting this year. Interestingly enough, you think to Wisconsin Badgers basketball teams in the past, you say, okay, they have great offense, but it relies on a 3-point shot. Not this year. They have a really good offense, top 15 offense, according to KenPom, and they are only making 32% of their 3-pointers. They have the 217th ranked 3-point shooting percentage in the country. That's not great. They're getting these shots inside the paint. They're getting these shots at the free throw line, making their free throws, not turning the ball over. Their steal percentage is top 10 in the country on offense. They turn the ball over far fewer times than anybody else. Turnover percentage on offense is 54, and they're a top 100 team at turning the ball over on the opposite end of the floor. Helps that you got a couple of guys, Max Klesmit, Chucky Hepburn, who are great at generating those steals, and John Blackwell has shown a capacity to generate those steals already this season. This is going to be a fun season for Wisconsin basketball. And so if you have not tuned in yet, tune in tomorrow. Tune in on Saturday at 1:15 to see this team take on Nebraska. I'm going to have an article about how Wisconsin looked and how the Wisconsin basketball program was looking the last time they played Nebraska and where things are going now. But those are some short words there. That article will be up by tomorrow morning before that game tips off. We'll be there like early in the morning. So you should be able to wake up overnight and see that over at Wisconsin Sports Heroics. Or you can find it by following me on Twitter at Kedrick Stumbris, or follow the podcast at Scotty Sixpack to get the latest updates in Wisconsin sports and the latest podcast episode that will also be in your feed tomorrow morning, already recorded, as me and a very special guest to the podcast break down the Chicago Bears and Green Bay Packers Week 18 game. Bears and Packers meet for the first time in 17 weeks as Chicago tries to get its first win in 10 meetings between these two teams. Justin Fields, who has not yet beaten the Green Bay Packers. And I had a lot of thoughts about Justin Fields on yesterday's episode, if you have not yet listened to that. But thank you again for listening to this episode of the Scotty Sixpack podcast. Subscribe wherever you find your podcast. Leave a review, 5 stars, kind comments if you're watching on YouTube, or if you would like to watch on YouTube, subscribe there to Scotty Sixpack. Like that video, and we will talk to you again real soon.